Perhaps you have heard that old curse, may you live in interesting times. Well, I think it's safe to say that we are living right now in very interesting times, perhaps a little too interesting for some people. But here we are, mid-2020, several months into a global pandemic that some people are taking more seriously than others, and in our own country. The boiling pot of institutionalized racism has finally boiled over, and citizens everywhere are rising up and demanding an end to the injustices suffered by black people and other people of color in this country that proclaims liberty and justice for all. Well, today, I would like to suggest to you that these very interesting times can actually be a gift to us, a great gift, because they illustrate the very purpose behind the path, the way that Jesus brought to the world. But first, let's look at this morning's reading from Paul's letter to the Romans that you just heard read a few minutes ago. In this part of his letter, Paul reflects upon how the gift of the Holy Spirit produces within us a process of turning our circumstances into gifts that can transform us. Gifts that can transform us. You know, Paul is not minimizing suffering because he has experienced it. He understands it. In fact, at some point in time, he was meting it out to the people of the way. He knows what suffering is all about. But what he is doing is he is pointing out the transformational possibilities that are available in the way of Jesus through the presence of the Holy Spirit. For example, the suffering that we experience or that we witness in other people can transform us as we move from detachment or judgment into a posture, an attitude, a practice of compassion. And then, from compassion into action, to end the causes of the suffering of the other, if it is within the realm of possibility for us, or to do whatever we can do. So you see, this attitude that Paul is describing actually carries on the ministry of Jesus that he sent his followers out to do and accomplish, that we heard about in the reading from Matthew this morning. And that ministry basically was to heal people, to cure sickness and disease, to cast out demons, to tend to the needs of people who are suffering or struggling to live. That's what Jesus sent them out to do. I think the greatest gift that can come out of these times of hardship is the commitment to make the world better, to end the sources and the causes of hardship and suffering, whether these are caused by social inequities or oppression and dominance, or by disease agents or genetic defects, or environmental factors, particularly if they are human-caused. Note also that Jesus sent out his earliest followers and his students, or disciples, same word, with these simple and focused instructions. Proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Straightforward. Now, the good news that they were proclaiming is that the realm of heaven is at hand, is accessible to all persons. It's a wholly different way of living, of thinking, of acting, and responding to the world that is possible for each of us. You see, being at hand means that we don't have to wait for death to be in the realm of heaven. This is why Jesus was so intent on sending people out to proclaim it. The realm of heaven that Jesus proclaims is a quality of existence here and now, and that is why it is good news. It's possible here and now. That's good news. You see, the good news is then coupled with actions, the actions that flow out of that realm of heaven. And they're the best expressions of the realm of heaven, bringing healing and wholeness to people's bodies, minds, and souls. So notice that this commission to go out is also coupled with a very explicit warning that the powers and systems of domination and oppression would oppose them and make life very difficult, if not kill them, for this message of hope and the release from bondage to destructive, life-draining systems and forces. Jesus understood that. He knew it was going to happen to him, and he knew it would happen to his followers. So he warned them. But then Jesus says not to worry what we shall say in those times. You know, I'm wondering what is being given to us to say in our times. What is the life-giving good news that we shall bear to the world? And what life-giving actions will accompany our proclamations? What is the gift of these times? Well, I think one gift that is given to us, one thing for us that is given to us to say, is speaking truth to power. You know, the disciples, when confronted by the powers of their time, were given truth to speak. These days, the cracks in our social facade have widened to such an extent that we are not allowed by God to ignore the injustices in our midst. That is the gift of this time. Finally, to address the deepest issues of injustice and oppression of our time. Rebecca Simon Peter is a church leadership consultant and a trainer who specializes in creating a culture of renewal in churches. In her most recent blog, she talks about how the recent cultural crises we are facing are opportunities to make the deep changes that Jesus calls us to make. Let me quote extensively from her. She says in her blog post, "The church, once hemmed in by tradition and by fear of change, has proven that it can effectively slip the knots that prevented it from making meaningful change. The result is brand new ways of being spiritual community. If the church can reimagine worship, fellowship, Bible study, giving, Holy Communion, baptism, funerals, and hospitality, the very things that defined us before, then I believe it can do the same with the insistent tentacles of systemic racism. In part, because there are a surprising number of similarities between the two crises. Now listen to what she says about that. First, she says, first, like the pandemic, systemic racism has far-reaching life and death implications. Addressing it well means that we have to change the way we think about things and do things. The church now has experience with this. Second, churches now know that what seemed impossible before is actually quite possible. Although many congregations resisted the idea for years, they can now make quick adjustments based on changing circumstances, adapt new forms of communication, and embrace innovative ways of being community. Similarly, recognizing and addressing systemic racism once seemed impossible to many. But if mainline congregations can grow and thrive during a pandemic, then perhaps churches do have the agility to tackle something as pervasive as systemic racism. Third, churches learned a new language to deal with an invisible virus whose vocabulary includes social distancing, droplets, and N95 masks. It also mastered new technologies like Facebook Live, Zoom, breakout rooms, and online giving platforms. Likewise, dealing with the almost invisible scourge of systemic racism will require a new language and a new willingness to try emerging technologies. Fourth, during the pandemic, tired church practices yielded to more foundational, life-giving spirituality. Taking the claims of systemic racism seriously will require a shift from the dogmatic denials of racism and the unconscious exercise of privilege to painful yet life-giving awareness of the people and the world around us. Fifth, and finally, faith-based community enjoyed a resurgence during the pandemic. People looked to spiritual leaders to provide meaning, solace, and inspiration. In the same way, spiritual leaders can guide us in this uncomfortable new world of identifying unconscious bias, unacknowledged privilege, and unseen barriers that have kept us away from each other. She closes with this: none of this will be easy, and none of this is guaranteed. It will take equal parts guts, prayer, self-reflection, education, determination, inspiration, and action. It's a lot of ingredients there to make the changes needed to envision and ensure a world that works for everyone. But now is the time to begin. It just might be the beloved community that arises. Well, the next couple of weeks, I want to look at how we, as a community of persons exploring the Jesus path for the 21st century, might be a part of the movement of God's Spirit to dismantle the sinful structures of racism in our communities and our nation. This time has been given to us, and we can either consider it a curse or a gift. I pray that we will be the worthy persons that Jesus spoke about, who receive the proclaimers of his good news of a transformed life and transformed world. This time presents us with the opportunity, as well as the necessity, to engage in the work of dismantling and disentangling from racism and other systems of domination and oppression. And this is precisely the path of Reboot JP21. Moving into the bigger mind, bigger heart, bigger world, and bigger life that is the kingdom of heaven, the realm of heaven. And I pray that we will open our churches and our hearts to the message of this new life that these messengers are bringing to us. May we receive them as messengers sent by Jesus. And may we receive the message of a transformed world as the good news that Jesus knows it can be. Amen.